Dr. Uche. I'm an author, a publisher, a real life physician, and I love all things books. I review books and I also share tips to help others write their biographies. It's so great to have you here. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when new videos come up. Today I am reviewing a book. Patience is a Subtle Thief is the title. Patience is a Subtle Thief by Abi Ishola-Ayodeji. So Patience is a Subtle Thief by Abi Ishola-Ayodeji. I read this book. I listened to this book. Didn't have the time to read it live just yet. So I listened and I want to share my thoughts about the book. This book is fiction. And it is focused on a young woman called Patience Adewale. Patience is growing up with her dad, who is in politics, a very successful, you get the sense he's a successful entrepreneur and also in politics. She lives in Ibadan with her family. That's a city in Nigeria. And she ends up going to university in Lagos, which is the capital city, the largest city in Nigeria. So Patience lives at home with her dad and a stepmom. Her mom is not in the picture, but you get the sense from the very get-go that Patience is wondering or has wondered about her mother her whole life, where she is. She knows her mom is in the US somewhere, but she's always wondered about how to reconnect with her mom. So Patience has a half-sister, Margaret, and her stepmom, I mentioned, is in the picture. And they take care of her dad and the stepmom, but you can tell she doesn't have the feeling one would have living with their biological mother. You know, she feels a little bit like an outsider. So when she gets older and it's time to go to college, she's very much looking forward to going away from home. Her dad is on the controlling side, and she wants to get away from home because she wants to find a way to get to the US to see her mom again. And she hasn't seen her mom in 10 years. So near the very beginning, there's a party going on. Turns out that her dad, I'm sipping peppermint tea today. I love tea. Turns out that her dad got a political position. And so there's a party to celebrate this accomplishment. And somebody who comes to the party is a certain woman, Lola. She calls her Auntie Lola, who is, she didn't know the woman. The woman walked up to her and said, kind of introduced herself, started talking to her and said, "Oh, you don't know me? I'm your mother's very good friend, your mother's best friend, your real mother, your biological mother." So Patience is drawn to this woman who knows her mom, her biological mom, and who volunteers that she's willing to tell her more about her mom. And this woman lives in Lagos. And she asks her, when you come to go to university in Lagos, come look me up, come visit me. And I'll sit with you and talk to you. I'll tell you more about your mom. So Patience is very excited about this. She goes up to Lagos. She goes to visit this woman, Lola. She calls her Auntie Lola, which is a very sort of Nigerian habit of calling your mother's friends auntie. So not biological auntie in sense of the word in the West, but more your mother's friend. So she goes to visit her, meets Lola's daughter, Bimbe, and makes friends with her. And she's told more about her mother, who's in the US, and this woman promises to help her get her birth certificate. So Patience was born in Washington, D.C., and if only she could get her birth certificate, she'd be able to apply for her US passport because that makes her a US citizen. Now, her passport is probably somewhere in her father's hands, but it's hard to get a hold of. So on the other hand, she meets a cousin, Kashi, who is hanging out in Lagos, getting up to no good, like running, really involved in petty theft and all sorts of criminal activities, trying to eke out a living in that manner. Now she drops out of college. She goes to this cousin's place, starts staying with this cousin. She gets involved with a certain young man, Chike, who is basically ferries people back and forth on a motorbike across the city, which is something very well known in Nigeria called Okada. So he would basically, sit on this motorbike and ferry people from place to place because there's so much traffic in some parts of the country. It's easier to get around on a motorbike. And that's what this young man does, even though he's an engineer with a university degree. But he wasn't able to get a job after graduating. And somehow Patience knows this young man from before when they lived in the other city and the cousin Kashi was there and already friends with him, something like that. I can't quite remember very well, but she knew him from before and she's meeting him back in Lagos. And they get involved and actually start dating along the way while she's busy, fixated, obsessed about finding a way to go to the US to see her mom. She gets her cousin Kashi involved in a plot. This is after she's dropped out of college to go back home to her home city and go into her father's safe and try to get her passport, to steal it, basically. She goes with the cousin. The cousin tries to get this passport, comes out, says, I couldn't find it. It's not there, but I found money, and he stole the money. What do? Oops, well, her dad shows up and gets all livid and says, I know you dropped out of school and I know you don't go for your classes. I have people watching you. They tell me you're not attending college as you should be. He gets really mad. He says, I have already disenrolled you from that college in Lagos and I'm going to bring you back to the local university here so you can go to school here where I can watch you. And you have no choice in the matter. It's already done, that kind of thing. So this girl is upset. She's not able to reason with her dad. Dad will not hear her out whatsoever. He's made up his mind. So instead of complying with that, she actually gets Kashi and they run away from home. She leaves the home. She goes back to Lagos against her father's wishes. And so the father disowns her. So now in Lagos, she's a college dropout. She's on her own. She's trying to earn money to go back to the US to see her mom. She has to earn enough money to buy a ticket, an air ticket. She has to get her passport. Remember, she's a US citizen by birth, but she has none of her documents. She doesn't have a birth certificate, so she has no way of proving that she was born in the US. She actually goes to the embassy and tries to get them to give her or tries to apply for a passport, only to realize, hey, of course, you have to show proof of what you're saying, that you were born in Washington, D.C., and she doesn't have any proof. And this Auntie Lola, who's supposed to help her find her birth certificate, seems to be dragging her feet on it. She's not working on it as fast as Patience would have thought. And Patience is not really sure what's up with all that. So she gets involved in these criminal activities because she tries to do something honest to earn money. She tries to learn how to sew, but obviously, honest things take a while to earn money with, right? And so they're looking for the fast way, which is criminal. And they get involved in theft and basically plans and making a whole lot of money from pretending to deposit or depositing checks, fraudulent checks in bank accounts, and then going and withdrawing millions of naira and really very scary stuff that they got up to. And then they also got a certain guy, or they sold somebody's house, somebody who had traveled. They broke into his home, acted like they owned the home with forged documents and sold it to somebody. So this guy thinks he has a new home only for the owner to show up and say, what are you doing in my house? Get out, And so this guy has lost all his life earnings and savings on this home purchase, this thing he thought he purchased, only to realize it was a fraudulent sale. So he ends up burning the house in anger and he ends up imprisoned. So it's such a hot mess. The lives they destroyed and the assets and what they did to people in their criminal activities. And as she tried to, what she thought was trying to earn money to get to the US to see her mom, to make it worse, this is actually set in Nigeria at a time of political upheaval in the early 90s. there was a presidential election that was annulled, whereby it was widely believed that it was clearly won by a certain politician, but the military government annulled the elections. And so all this was happening. The youth were in an uproar. There were demonstrations across the country. Unfortunately, this patience and Chike now get involved in ferrying contraband outside the country, specifically to the US. And gosh, this is really scary stuff. And this is what they get involved in. And just when they were about to make the trip to the US, they get involved or they get stopped at a police roadblock, and things go awry. Chike gets hit by gunfire, and he actually dies from a gunshot wound. So the author kind of fast forwards to a time when Patience has now made it to the US and actually gets to meet her mother, only to realize that her own brother, same mother, same father, is living in the US with her mom. Her mom was pregnant when she left Nigeria, when her father threw her out of the house. And she starts asking questions about how all this happened and so on and so forth. And this is actually how the book wraps up. Of course, along the way, we get to realize that the cousin Kashi, that day he tried to steal her passport from the father's safe, that he actually did find the passport and he did take it, but he didn't tell Patience. He took it and kept it all to himself, only to go sell it on the black market. So there's really a hot mess. This book is all about how you can't trust anyone. Auntie Lola, for example, who promised to try get her birth certificate, wasn't actually working on that. She had her own ulterior motives. So it was totally ridiculous and sad how the whole thing ended. But to comment on the book in a nutshell, I have to own up, the book was slow. I tried to, or I almost gave up at certain points, but I was so curious. I wanted to know. Patience would go on and on and on, but I want to go to the US to see my mom. I want to go to the US to see my mom. It was becoming a tad bit boring, I have to say, the way she kept going on and on and on about it. Now, I understand. I can't imagine the pain such a young woman would be living with, knowing her mom is alive and well somewhere and she just can't see her, hasn't seen her for years. I'm not downplaying that pain. I'm just saying that the plot, the way the book was written, the author lost me here in many places. I almost gave up, but I was so curious. I wanted to know how it would end, whether Patience would eventually get to see her mom. And so I kept at it just because of curiosity. But for a greater part, I'd say, of the early and middle of the book, I wasn't really enjoying it much. Now, this is said very respectfully, because I applaud and respect anyone who puts pen to paper, or who can type up a manuscript, or who can come up with the idea and create a manuscript and a story. Have a lot of respect for those folks. But I would say that the plot lost me, and it was hard to keep my attention. So this is not one of those I would say was captivating. I made a conscious decision to keep going. If not for that, I think I would have given up. And yet, if you can stick with the book, near the end, it actually starts making a little more sense. It picks up. It stops being as monotonous. That's what I would say. It kind of got monotonous near the middle and near the beginning. But if you stick to it, it gets a little more active. Things start happening. And ultimately you get your answer. You get to see that she did see her mom, and they had a reunion. I don't know if I'd call it happy or not, but at least she reached closure. She started getting some answers, saw her mom alive and well and actually thriving in New York, and met her. I guess she ended up meeting the brother. They didn't really describe that meeting specifically, but it was going to happen towards the end of the book. And so sad too, the way Chike died, and really a sad aspects in the book, how a graduate cannot get a job and is doing all sorts of things to survive. Chike's mother was ill, and he was trying to raise money for her to get health care. The sort of things some young people end up doing, and how they hurt people. Oh my goodness, hurt people in the process of all the theft and criminal activities they got involved in. And the gentleman who was sold a home fraudulently and lost everything. And so much hurt and pain in this book, I would say. So that's it. That's Patient is a Subtle Thief by Abi Ishola-Ayodeji. I hope you might consider reading it. Again, this is Dr. Uche, and I'll see you when I come back next time. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.